So we're here. We're on our 10:30 a.m. financial advisor training call this morning. We've got McCain, Grant, Rob, Aaron. I'm Andy, and today's topic is refinancing. So there's a couple of different reasons why your client would ask you about refinancing, or you would suggest refinancing their current mortgage. We've seen, a lot of this go on in the last couple of years. So I'll kind of pass it around as to a couple of the big reasons why someone would want to refinance. Grant, I'll throw it over to you first. What's the number one reason that you've seen people need to refinance their mortgage?
To lower their monthly payment. So if someone closed on a mortgage and they've owned it for a couple of years, let's just say here in this scenario, they got a 5% interest rate and rates dropped and now they're at 4%. So one of the number one reasons would be, hey, we want to refinance to a lower rate and we want to end up getting, lower our monthly payment obligations. So that's one, I would say that's the number one reason why people think they can refinance, but there's tons of other ones.
Yes. So with that option, I mean, it's pretty simple. You just look at the interest rate, you look at the cost that it would take to repackage that loan, and then what's the break even and how much are you saving per month? Pretty simple math equation.
I'd say a lot of people don't know it does cost money to refinance your house. There's still the same closing costs that you would have with purchasing a house. You just obviously don't have your down payment, but most people, you can finance those closing costs with your current equity that you have in your house. So you'd use some of the equity to end up paying for it. But long story short, to lower monthly payment rate and term, that would be one of the number one reasons.
Yeah, they can roll that in so it's not cash out of pocket. And then another point with that is, Andy, like asking how long do you plan on owning the property when you look at the refinance. So it's not necessarily how long do you plan on living there, to kind of dovetail into some of the other stuff, but how long do you plan on owning the property? And then if you figure that break even, then you kind of make your decision accordingly. But it's not necessarily just how long you're going to live there. You might want to keep it as an investment property, for years down the road too.
Yeah, exactly. So if you're planning on holding on to it as a long-term investment, and the break even is maybe 3 to 4 years, and you're planning on holding on to it for 20 years, like that makes a lot of sense. But ideally, you would want that break even period to be within the first 3 years of owning, because if you sell or then refinance again in that break even period, then you're missing out on the benefits. Aaron, what's the second biggest reason that people refinance?
I'm with Grant. There's lots of different reasons. I've got a couple of minutia ones that I'm thinking of, but I think probably the second biggest one would be for cash out, cash in hand, or to pay off other debts.
Got it.
So basically, and those types of loans are a little more limited than, say, a purchase mortgage in terms of equity remaining in the property. So normally on what we call a cash out refinance or a debt consolidation refinance, the loan to value is going to be limited to anywhere between 75 to 80%, depending on some other factors, but there's still going to be a 20% at least left over in the equity in the house. They're not going to do a cash out refinance to 100%. So
right, yeah. So equity has to be higher in the property. Sometimes the credit score requirements might be a little bit higher. Sometimes, well, not sometimes, most of the time, if not every single time, the interest rate and the price they pay essentially is going to be a little bit more expensive, because when they're pulling that cash out, that's more of a risk to the bank. So they're going to pay a little bit more for that money. And then, like you said, repackaging other debt, consolidating, other high interest loans. That's super common, especially with values over the last 2 years. Anybody who's owned a home in the last 2 years has seen their value go up tremendously pretty much anywhere in the country. So that's a huge opportunity for people to pull out cash and repackage other debt, consolidate, and just lower their overall interest expenses.
Yeah, so typically they can put everything under the home equity umbrella, debt against your house, and they're not paying the consumer rates, and also it tends to free up a lot of monthly cash flow as well. where depending on what debt they're paying off, you know, their minimums versus what they've been trying to pay off on credit cards, or if they've got installment loans, car loans, RV loans, that kind of thing, where you're freeing up these big chunks of 5, 6, 7, $800 a month with each debt that you're paying off. And then when you convert that to mortgage money, the monthly cash flow is a lot better.
Yeah, I always like telling like a story in this instance because I had a success story in this, but 30 seconds here. I refinanced someone in a cash out to a higher interest rate, which is a little different mindset wise. But with the cash he was receiving after he paid off all those different debts, he ended up having his mortgage payment went up like $200, but he ended up saving like $600 by not having all these different credit card payments and things like that. So it ended up saving him $600, and in that instance, budget 101, he ended up investing the difference. So he was already used to the budget. He was like, hey, we're going to go ahead and push all that $600 into retirement savings and things like that. So I'd say for financial advisors, that's something that you can utilize, is how can you kind of get someone, you know, financial knowledge 101, how can you get them a little bit more, you know, budgetary there by utilizing their mortgage. So
yeah, 100%. So not only, you know, you want to lower an interest rate, but sometimes you don't even have to lower the interest rate to save them on their cash flow and essentially free up hundreds of dollars a month to then go invest into other investments that are within their plan that they already have. Any other big reasons to refi that we haven't talked about yet? Maybe McCain or Rob?
Yeah, I guess the only other one would be adjusting your term. It kind of goes along with the rate and term refinance, but say you wanted to pay your mortgage off faster and it made sense with the rates decreasing where your payments are going to be about the same, lowering your term to like a 15 or 20 year, down from if you had like 28 or 25 years left, lowering the term, or maybe even increasing it back up to then stretch out those payments and lower them.
I think the big thing there would just be depend on like what your goals are as a client. You know, like if you want to pay off your house, then you could lower the term and maybe even lower your monthly payment. I'm thinking of another one here, number 3, Andy. It's a pretty big one. Divorce.
I was about to say changes in your family situation.
Family situation. Yep. Brendan, do you want to run through one of the unique things with divorce if it comes into refinancing?
Yeah, I think the divorce, most people, a refinance loan, if it's a rate and term loan, that's the cheapest rate that people get when the loan to value is, let's say, 75% of the house value or less. The mortgage that you're doing is 75% or less than the house value. When you're when you're cashing out, that's a different terminology. Those rates are more expensive. When people are divorcing, as long as they have a divorce decree that states the terms to where the cash is going, it's considered a rate and term refinance. And you can do a rate and term refinance up to 95% of the value. So essentially, you know, there shouldn't be much equity left in the home if they're getting a divorce. And, you know, like what's the stat? 50% of marriages end in divorce. There's a lot of this happening. And if you're a planner, you know, it's good to know these things to be able to advise your clients. One thing real quick, McCain, you had mentioned about changing the term. I think with an advisor, you know, a lot of you people watching would see your client come in and they're super excited about the 2.5% 15-year loan that they have on their house, or maybe 3.5%, and their mortgage payment's $4,300. And then when you look up, they have no room to plan for insurance, disability, or certain things because they're putting all this equity into their home that they're already at, you know, 40% loan to value, or they owe $500,000 on $1 million house, and they're gulping on this 15-year payment. I would say that you're going to see a lot of that. And then the question would be, how do you advise them to free that up? I mean, is it a better plan to get out of that 15-year mortgage? Because once you're in a 15-year mortgage, you're strapped in. You're not changing your obligation to the bank. You can always have a 30-year mortgage, maybe not even need to refinance and just prepay it like a 15-year. So I wanted to bring that because I feel like I've seen that a lot with advisors who have called me and guys on this over the years and said, hey, here's this situation. They can't really do anything because they're on a 15-year. one other thought, have we, the home equity line, that's the last kind of piece that I see that right now, if there's a lot of clients, I mean, we can see scenarios where refinancing from a lower rate to a higher rate is beneficial for several reasons, but there's got to be times where most of your clients right now, if they've picked up any consumer debt, they've definitely picked up home equity. So the question, like their house value has gone up, their mortgage balance has gone down, and they could have 3 or 4 loans that just are weird little loans. They got a boat. Then he bought a motorcycle. Then she went and bought a Rolex watch, and they've got 4 or 5 different consumer loans, all at, 10, 12%, because they just wanted to get whatever they got. Is a home equity line that would go on top of a mortgage. It's essentially a line of credit, just like a credit card, but it's attached to the home as security. And ultimately those payments, those rates are going to be in the 5s, 6s, and 7s because of prime. They're tied to prime plus a margin. So you guys know where prime is today?
About 6.
About 6.
It was 6.25.
6.25, 6.25. Yeah, they just bumped it.
Yeah. So, I mean, debt consolidation on a home equity line versus a refinance is going to be something that we could advise your clients all the time, that, that's kind of the path of least resistance if a mortgage isn't more beneficial. Did I say that right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
That was good.
Yeah, the last piece I wanted to throw in there was a lot of folks are in mortgages that are coming due that either have a balloon payment or end, or they got a hard money loan to buy a house that they were going to fix up or something like that. That would be the last piece of the puzzle where once the property, in that situation, someone buys a house that needs a ton of work, it's not going to go for a conventional loan. So they had to get a private loan or a hard money loan, something like that. That's the last piece where we could repackage that into a primary mortgage. If someone builds a house and they got a construction loan at the very end, we refinance that into the primary mortgage. So that's kind of that last piece. Any like alternative financing that's not a primary mortgage, you eventually want to get it over to like a 30-year fixed or a 15-year fixed, because that's going to have the best terms and lowest interest for the long run.
Nice.
I've got a couple other that are scenarios that are somewhat related. What Brendan mentioned about the divorce, that's key there because it allows you to do a couple things. It allows you to potentially gain access to the payout of the equity of the house. Also can help take someone off the mortgage if they have a joint mortgage together. It clears the other person's credit history, which is going to be beneficial going forward. And then also cleans up the title piece too. You can do a quick claim at the time of refinancing, and that kind of thing. The other scenario is sometimes people co-sign for people. So I've helped people where they co-sign for their son, or daughter 5, 10, 15 years sooner. So when I'm thinking about financial planners and the life events that you guys deal with, so the payment's not a big deal. Oh, my son's made the payment for 10 years, not a big deal. But then when they get into estate planning, they're like, hey, they want to come off the loan. They don't want any liability. They're trying to clean things up, in that life phase. Again, potentially gaining some access to some equity if they wanted to, and then coming off title, things like that. So some of that stuff in that estate planning piece where people have co-signed years prior is another reason why we've done refinances, to just get the loan in one person's name.
Yeah, another one that I add in there would be like just changing loan types. A lot of times people they qualified for like an FHA loan and they have really, really, really high mortgage insurance. That loan comes with higher mortgage insurance. And a lot of people want to get that removed. So that would kind of go with lower monthly payment. But a lot of people just don't know the difference. So if they, were able to pop into a conventional loan and even remove mortgage insurance altogether, that would be really another reason that, someone would want to jump into a refi.
Yeah, or refi from an adjustable rate mortgage into a fixed mortgage. That's another way of, it's going to be a different loan product. I think it's important to mention that when you get a refinance, it's going to be pretty much without the real estate contract and everything else you have to do to buy your house. It's going to be the same loan process. It's pretty much the same underwriting. We look at credit, we look at income the exact same way. if they're self-employed, if they have W-2 jobs, that process is exactly the same. I guess the only piece that we don't really analyze as hard is going to be the assets, because they're not bringing any money to the table. But some people think that, you know, a refi is something quick and easy, and it can be, but there's still usually an appraisal. There's still, you know, all the underwriting steps that it takes to get a loan, because essentially at the end of the day, it's still risk to the bank the same way as a purchase loan is risk to the bank. So the steps taken to get that loan are going to be pretty much the same. And it's, you know, a little bit cleaner of a process because there's not as many deadlines, but if you're working with someone who knows what they're doing and can move through that process, it's not much of a headache. And, you know, you just got to be aware of that going into it. So if your client asks you questions about how to get a refinance, essentially it's the underwriting is going to be pretty much the same as when they bought their house.
I mean, you got to think about it the same way. This is a bank picking up a mortgage the same way when you're buying a house, it's a bank picking up a mortgage. I mean, it's going to be underwritten and scrutinized in the exact same fashion.
Yep. And you do not have to refinance with the servicer. You can refinance with any institution that gives mortgages. A lot of people think that they have to go through whoever holds their loan at that point. It's not true. You're simply just swapping out the loan, no matter who currently services the loan. Anything else that anybody wanted to add? We're about here at about 15, 20 minutes.
I'm just curious, Andy, when do you refi?
When do I refi?
No, when do you refi? We've talked about why, but when?
Yeah. Well, I mean, essentially, when your equity goes up and you've been monitoring your neighborhood, you know that the value of your home has gone up. And so, you know, for the advisor, asking the right questions around how can we minimize monthly debts? How can we increase cash flow? That's going to be the biggest thing. It doesn't necessarily mean like there's a certain point in the loan that you should look at refinancing. It's all going to be situational. And so I think when interest rates go down, everybody should look at refining, you know, if the rate's going to go down from their current mortgage. So it is situational based off of that client's current situation. Anything to add, Brendan, Aaron, Grant? Okay, cool. Well, we'll wrap up. Thank you guys for being on here, and we'll talk to you next week.
Thank you.
See you next week.
Thank you.
Yeah.